Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and in this video what I'm going to do is try to create a full CRUD API, to-do list API, with Mongo, with Express, from going from nothing to deployment. Okay, so basically the goal here is at the end we'll have a fully deployed API on Heroku. My goal is to do this within under an hour. So right now the clock says 6:03. So let's see if I can get this done within the hour. Okay, so let's do it. Okay, first thing I want to do is just make sure that we have our database URL. Okay, so I'm going to head over to mongodb.com, log into one of my accounts. Okay, my teaching account. Okay. And now for the purposes of this tutorial, like I don't want to expose necessarily all like my database credentials. So what I'm going to do and again, if you're following along and you signed up for a MongoDB account, again, first thing you would do is create your first cluster, and you should be able to accept all the default options. Like shouldn't have to change anything. You just choose the free cluster, hit OK, it spins up a cluster. You only need one cluster, so if you already have an account and you set up the cluster already, that's all you need. One cluster can be enough for like infinite hobby projects. So you wouldn't really need another cluster unless you decided you want to build like the next Facebook or something. Okay, so right now my cluster is paused, so let me turn it on. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the URL, but first a couple things I need to do. Can I resume when you connect to a cluster? Okay, that's fine. Okay, so basically once you actually set up your account, there's a few things you want to make sure you have set up for this to work for you. So on network access, whitelist all the IPs. So I'll just undo it real quick. So I'll delete this, and then you'll see this screen. And I want to add an IP address. I'm going to click here on allow access from anywhere and hit confirm. The reason is like when I deploy the Heroku, I don't know what the IP address is going to be, so you really need to allow all IP addresses, at least for now. If you set up your own like virtual server with a static IP address, then you can kind of tighten up the security. But for now, that's fine. And then also create a user. I'm going to create my own user. So which is going to be, we will just say it's cheese. Cheese. It's going to be the password. But this is going to be a temporary user. This user will only be alive for the day. Okay, what did I like? The password provided is too weak. I am fine with a weak password. Where's the little button so I can say I'm okay with a weak password? I guess they don't let you be okay with it anymore. So, cheese. Let me just make sure that's spelled correctly. Cheese, good. Okay, that's fine. So it's cheese with cheese as the password. Okay, I'll delete this user too. Okie dokie. Okay, so I have this user for the next day. Now, so basically I have whitelisted my IPs. I have a user for my database cluster. Now I can go in there and set up my connection URL. So I'll click on connect. And then I am going to say I want to connect, but I want to connect using my application. I'm using Node. So I'm going to copy this URL here. Just copy that URL. Head over to my blank folder where right now I'm going to build this project out of. So this is a blank folder that's not a Git repo. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start off by creating my .env file. .env file. Again, that's where we're going to store all our environmental variables. So I'm just going to call it database URL. So it's a pretty good variable name. Now there's a couple things I need to change. Okay, there's my username. So again, it's like the protocol. So MongoDB server. Username cheese. Password is cheese. So let me set that. Cheese. This is the cluster. Like this is the actual server where that Mongo cluster is at. And this is going to be the name of my database. We'll call it to-dos. And then this is just a URL query that represents just some settings that MongoDB wants you to have set up. Okay, so that's all fun and good. Okay. And then while we're here, we might as well also set up the port that we want to work on the development side. So I'm going to set it up on 4,000. Although, why not? Let's do 10,000. You can. Why not? Let's do port 10,000. Okay, you can go up to like 65,000. Cool. So now let's just start setting up the project. So I'm going to open up my terminal. And I'm going to touch all my files first. So I want a server.js. I'm also going to want a .getignore because I don't want to like upload everything. I'm going to want, let's do that. Okay, then I'm going to want to make some folders. Make dir a models folder and a database folder. Again, you don't have to use the same folder structure that I do, but this is just the way I generally do it. Models, database, controllers. And that's good enough for me for now, because we're just doing a quick, simple API. And next, what I want to do is create a new npm project. So npm init-y. Okay, so that creates the new project. So package.json. Nice. I'm going to install Nodamon as a dev dependency. So npm install --save -dev Nodamon. Okay, let that install. And then I'm going to install all my normal dependencies. npm install. Of course, I want Express because that's how we're going to run our server. Cores for setting those cores headers. I want Morgan for logging. I'm going to want Mongoose to connect to my database. I want .env so I can get those .env variables. And I'm also going to download Merced Logger. This is a special logging library I made because why not? But it's just going to allow me to do little colorful logs. So there we go. Let's install all those things. Okay, good. So I got all those libraries installed. Okay, now let me set up my two scripts. Okay, so my dev script, I want to set up to just run node server.js. And then my start script, actually it's the other way around. My start script should be node server.js. And this should be nodamon server.js. Okie dokie. And that is good. I think that's all I really need. Okay. Now, while I'm also, before I start setting stuff up, I also want to set up what's called a proc file. This is going to be for Heroku when we deploy. This is just going to tell Heroku what command to run when it deploys. So I want to run a web process, so that way it assigns my application a port number. And it does it through that port variable that we set earlier. Web. And what I wanted to do when it's done setting up my project, I want it to run npm start. That's it. That should do the job. Okay, and start the server. Cool. Okay, next things first, we start setting up the server. So I'm going to say const express equals require express const cores. Just going to do all my dependencies. Require cores. Const Morgan equals require Morgan. Const express cores Morgan. Oh, I need to get the .env stuff, so I always like to do that first to make sure. The reason is those .env variables aren't going to exist until this function runs, so you just want it to run first. So that way there's no chance that you're not going to reference a variable before it exists. So .config, that brings in all our environmental variables. And I think that's good. So then what I want to do is create the application object. Okay, and I always like to kind of have like fancy headlines just to make it easier to like find what's what in my code. So create application object. So const express or const app equals app. I mean express. Okay, cool. And then here we are going to have our routes and routers eventually. I always just like to create one sort of test route just to kind of test that our server's working. So app.get, we'll call this slash, so it's the root route, and I just want to do rec res, and then we just want to respond with hello world. We just want to test it out. Okay, and that reminds me I have merced logger, so let's use that. Okay, so const log equals merced require merced logger. So this log function just allows me to do like colored logs. So I can do like log dot, and there's a bunch of fun colors. Okay, although I'm not doing a console log, I want to res.send res.send hello world. Yay. Okay, and now we just need to start our listener. Get server listening. Now here's the thing though, I don't want to just hard code my port number. I want to use that environmental variable. So I'm going to have some variables that I want to make sure I go and grab. So one of those is going to be const port equals process.env.port, because again, anything that's in my .env file is tugged away in this process.env object. That's where all the environmental variables get stored in Node. Okay, so I'm grabbing that environmental variable. I want to use it down here, app.listen. So I want to listen on whatever the port is, and I want to set a default value just in case there isn't a .env file. We'll say 3000 is the default. Okay, port.listen, and then I want to put a message. Now here's where I'm going to want to use merced logger. So I'm going to say log.green, and then I want to get an emoji. I always like using an emoji for this, just to have some fun. So let's say here UTF-8 emoji. Okay, let's use the hearts face. That works for me. Copy. Okay. Server, and now I want to use double backticks so we can use interpolation. Control V. Server is listening on port, and then we stick the port variable there. Put another happy face. Okay, that makes for a fun message. So now first thing we're going to do is just test to say, hey, does this, at this point, this is like, my server should run. Like I should be able to get like that hello world message. So I want to just test that out before I go too deep in the weeds. So npm run dev, and see I get this nice little message. See, when I do like green. Oh, I forget that this takes two messages. So this is, so let me just do this. Server status. Okay, and then comma. That's how merced logger works. It takes like a heading and then the message. So see server state, I want status. Server is listening on port 10,000. Nice. Okay, good times. So now let's try to go to port 10,000. Localhost 10,000. And I get hello world. So far so good. Okay. So that's all fun and good. Okay. Now let's do the middleware. So middleware should go before the routes. Again, doesn't have to, but that's generally a good place to put it because you want it to run before your routes typically. So let's just start going through it. I always like to do cores first, just make sure that everyone gets green lighted to come into the server. Okay, and again, just a plain running of the cores middleware just allows anyone to make a request to my API, but that's fine for now. App.use Morgan, because we want logging. I'm going to use the dev version. Okay, app.use. We're going to be making this a JSON API, so I need express.json to parse those JSON bodies. Anything I'm forgetting? I don't need static. I don't need URL encoded. I think we are good for now. Okay, so this all looks fine and good. Just looking to see if I see anything out of the ordinary. Okie dokie. So now let's work on connecting our database. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here, and I could just write the connection code here in server.js. That would totally fine. But again, the idea is like you want to organize your code, because what if I decide to make this like a really robust to-do API? I don't want to have too much going on in any one particular file. So generally what I do is I'll just package the connection in a connection.js. So in here, I'm going to import mongoose. So const mongoose equals require mongoose. Okay. And we can use, and then we also going to want the .env because we need to get that database URL. So require .env .config, so that way those environmental variables are in scope in this file. Cool, so we imported the stuff. Okay, again, I want to set up some variables. The two main variables I want to set up is the database URL, so const database URL. Again, the names of these variables are all arbitrary, but I did call it database.url in here, so I should kind of keep the names consistent, but process.env.database URL. Then what I want to do is create my config object that we use to kind of get rid of those deprecation warnings inside Mongo. So this is just going to be an object that has two properties mainly. Use unified topology, which we're going to say is true, and use new URL parser, which we'll say is also true. Cool. So we set those variables up. Now I'm going to connect to the database. Okay. And we're going to have mongoose.connect. And then we want to connect to the database URL and pass in the config object. Nice, we are connected. Then we want to set up events. So again, Mongoose has some built-in events that we can kind of use for different things. I'm going to use them to just have some little useful messages pop up at certain times. So event messaging, I'll call it. So this is all done around the mongoose.connection object. And that object has a function called on, which allows you to register events. Okay, and actually we'll just do this in separate lines. So mongoose.connection.on, and the event is called open, meaning the connection opens. And basically what we're going to do is do a function. I want to use Merced logger, so let me import that. Const log equals require Merced logger. So this is so when the connection opens, that's a good thing. So I'm going to use a green message, log.green. Okay, so log.green, and then we're going to say database status, and the status will be, I'm going to basically get another emoji. So let me go bring up that emoji list again. UTF-8 emoji. Let's see here, what's a good database emoji? The thumbs up is fine. Let's use that. Okay. So we're going to say okay, database, or I'm just say connected to Mongo, which we don't see there yet because this file's not connected to anything yet, but it will be. Okay, mongoose.connection. Then I want another event to happen when the connection closes. So close. Okay. In that situation, just copy this over. Control C. I'm going to change this to magenta. And we'll say disconnected from Mongo. And then we're going to have one more for if there's an error in connecting to Mongo. And that's going to be log.red. Okay, so we have the different color logging. Yay. Cool. Okay. And then at that point, our connection is ready. So what we do is we're going to module.exports the Mongoose object. So going forward, whenever we need Mongoose, we'll just import this version of Mongoose that's already connected to the database, which allows the rest of our app to inherit the connection. Okay, so basically this does the job. That should be all good. And then what I'm going to do is create my to-do model. So new file, to-do.js. Okay. So we're going to say pull out the model and schema functions from, so schema model from Mongoose will require Mongoose. And then what I want to do is, not from Mongoose. Because if I pull it from Mongoose, then I'm pulling out a fresh Mongoose object, which is not connected. I want to use the already connected one from connection.js. So I want to do /db/connection. That way I'm using the already connected one. So that way I don't have to reestablish the connection somewhere else. Okay. So then we'll say const to do, let me just think about that. No, const to do schema equals new schema. Okay, which will just be message or reminder, which is going to be a string, which is the thing you need to remember to do. And then whether it is completed, okay, which is going to be a Boolean, and that's fine with me. Now, why is it complaining? New schema. Oh, that's right, because this shouldn't be curly brackets. Well, I mean, it will be, but this should be parentheses and curly brackets. So parentheses and then curly brackets in there. And then let me just cut this out. Control X. Paste. There we go. Because you're passing the object to schema saying, hey, this is what a to-do looks like. Okay, now we create the to-do model, to-do, and we say, hey, we want to create a model called to-do that, hey, everything in that to-do collection follows the to-do schema. Okay, and that creates our to-do model that we can use to do stuff with. And now we're just going to export module.exports to do. That's all we're going to need for the rest of the app. But might as well just label some stuff here. Okay. So we created our schema, created the model, and we exported the model. Okay, and then keep in mind, we are importing the already connected Mongoose object from the connection file. Okay. Cool. Fun. Okay, so now I have this to-do object. What I want is a router, because I'm going to build all my routes in a router. Okay, so what I'm going to do is head over to controllers now and create my router. So new file. And this is going to be my to-do router, so to-do.js. I'm going to be using the model in here, so I'm going to want to import that. So const to-do equals require / models / to-do. Okay, I also need the router function from Express. So const router equals require Express. Okay, all fun and good. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my router. So const router equals router. That creates a router object. And the bottom line is at the end of this file, that router needs to be exported with all my routes. Okay, so just to kind of skip to the punchline, module.exports equals router. Okay. And even though we haven't written any routes yet, I can now take this back to my server.js, import the router, const to-do router equals require // actually it's not even // it's / controllers / to-do. And see, now it starts now notice, now we're seeing that it's connected to Mongo. Why? Because the minute I connected the to-do router, the way Node works is that it's always going to load the file that I require first. So essentially when I ran this line of code and it runs require controllers to do, it's going to run the to-do.js. And then once it, in that file, when it runs this line, before it goes any further, it's going to go run the to-do and models. And when this line runs, it's then going to go back to the connection file and run that before it runs anything else. So then basically the order that the files end up getting run in is going to be like connection first, then the to-do file gets read, then the to-do router gets read, and then the server.js gets completed. Okay, just so you can understand like sort of like the process by which Node is thinking throughout all these pieces. So just the minute I connected that in server.js, now that connection file is being run, so we can see the actual connection to Mongo becoming part of the process. Wonderful. Okay, so that's a good sign. Okay, so that's like the first test to see, hey, like if everything is working, even though technically the connection file isn't connected directly to server.js, it's connected like two files separately or 2 degrees, that's fine. It's long as it's connected to some file that eventually gets connected to server.js. When I run server.js, all those other files get run. Okay? So that's good. That's good. Okay. So now that that's all set, now we can start creating our routes. We have all our pieces to actually start creating our API. So there's different routes you want to make when you're making an API. First off, let's go to our controller. That's where we're going to make these routes. The first route is called the index route. Okay, and what the index route is, the returns all to-dos. That's what it should do. Give us back all our to-dos. Okay, so we're going to say router.get, not app.get, because now we're bundling all our routes in this router object. And the route is going to be /. Okay, why? Because I never finished connecting the router. The reason is if I go back to routes here, I'm going to say only use the routes in the to-do router if the route starts with /todos. If it starts with /todos, okay, then I want you to use the to-do router. Okay, so if a route starts with /todos, it'll get routed to the to-do router. So / technically this means /todos. Okay, so technically this is going to end up being a GET request to /todos. That's essentially what this is going to be. Okay, Now I'm going to pause it for a moment. I do think groceries got here. Okay, I think I lost like 5 minutes on the clock to go deal with groceries, but let's continue on. Okay, so again, this is going to end up being slash to do. So even though this doesn't say slash to do's, the reason why this is going to still be slash to do's is because technically the slash to do's is defined here when I route them to the router. So I just always like to make that very clear, because that's always something that like people are like, you know, they'll sometimes do slash to do's again, so then the route ends up becoming like slash to do's. Okay, so I always like to do async functions because I like using async await. So rec res. And to do this properly, we should use async await. I mean, try catch blocks. So try catch block. Actually, no, there's a better way I can do this. What I'm going to do is say res dot JSON. And because I'm using async await, it becomes as simple as saying await to do dot find. Okay, and the beauty of it is I don't have to sit there and do a callback. I don't have to do any dot thens because of the await. I can just sit there and say, hey, wait for the to do that find to finish. That's what gets sent to .json. Now, what happens if there's an error? Well, a cool thing you can do is I can just attach a .catch at the end and handle the error that way. And honestly, like to keep life simple, what I'm going to do is up here, I'll just define my error catcher. It's just a function to pass in there, so an error catcher. So this way I don't have to like write it a bunch of times. So catch, we'll call it const error equals error return error console.log error do I want to do it that way? No, actually I don't think I do. Because what I'm going to want to do instead is this. Okay, in the function that gets passed in here, it receives the error because I want to res.json that error. And I want to make sure I send it with a status code of 400 because a status code of 400 means an error. So .json. Okay, and then there we go. There's my route. That's the whole thing. Okay, and that has error handling and everything. Res.json. Again, it's going to do the to-do.find. And if for some reason there's an error, this .catch will then send back the error as a JSON. Oh, wait. Yeah, that's fine. Cool. Let's see if that works. So now we test it out. And again, since I have Nodamon running, it's automatically updated. So I should be able to go to localhost 10,000 / to-dos. And I get back an empty array. So it works. Again, there's no data in the collection right now, so it's going to be an empty array. But that's fine. It's working. Okay. Now let's do what's called our let's do the show route. Now the way the show route works is that I don't want to get all the to-dos. I just want to get a particular to-do based on an ID. Okay, so return a single to-do. Although I don't have any single to-dos to test this out with yet, but we'll just make the route and then we'll make some to-dos. So router.get, again, it's going to be to /ID because we're going to use URL params. Okay, async rec res. Again, just same deal. And it's pretty much going to be the same deal. So I'll just copy and paste this. But except the difference, instead of find, I'm going to do find by ID. Okay. And then pass in rec.params.id in there. Okay. And then that's it. There you go. That route's done. Okay. Let's do the next route. I'm just going to copy this for the sake of time. Then we're going to do the create route. And this is going to be a post request to /todos, which creates a new to-do. Okay, so in this case, this should be a post request. And this should just be to /todos. And async and all that stuff. This one's going to be a little bit more complicated, so I'll leave it at that for now. But basically, the first thing that should happen, because in this case now, we're getting a request body in. Okay, so I'm going to get, first I need to go get the new to-do. Actually, I could still do this all kind of in one line. Okay, so I can say to-do.create. So I'm creating to-do, but instead of passing it the ID of one to-do, I'm passing it the request body. So rec.body gets passed in. Okay, and again, I do the same thing with the error, and then that's it. Yeah, that's done. So let's test that out, make some to-dos. Okay, so I should be able to open up Insomnia. Insomnia is just like Postman, so if you've used Postman before, Insomnia is just another one. It's just on my computer, I can load that one up a little bit quicker. So I would go to 10, so localhost 10,000 /todos. I want to make a post request. And in Insomnia, the body of the request gets defined here, and you can choose what kind of type of body you want to send. So I want to send a JSON body. And if I remember our schema correctly, actually, I'll just look it up. The schema is reminder and completed. So that's the schema. So I got to send an object that follows that schema. So let me go back to Insomnia. So it's going to be a reminder property that says like eat your vegetables. And then there's going to be a completed property. Although again, this is supposed to be JSON, which means there needs to be quotations around the keys, not just the values. And then we're going to say completed is, actually we're going to say completed is false. Okay, so I'll hit send, and see I get the new to do. Let me add another one. Eat your, or brush your teeth. Brush your teeth. Okay, good. I got that. That was successful. Good. See, those are the responses I expected. So now if I go back to the browser and I go to /todos, I should see both of them. And look, there they are. Both of our to-dos. Magic. And then if I'm correct, I should be able to take one of these IDs. So I'll just take the ID here of eat your vegetables. If I can just get that 6. Okay, I don't want the quotation marks, but I can delete that after. So if I did /todos /the ID, now I get one of the to-dos. How amazing is that? How amazing. Okay, cool. So almost all the way there. So let's go back and do a couple more routes. Now for the sort of the longest of them, the trickiest of them all, the update route, because it kind of mixes a little bit of everything. So I will copy this over again. And this is going to be the update route. And the update route is supposed to be a put to /todos /ID. So the idea is I want to say, hey, I want to update this particular one based on the ID and the URL. And then what it does is that it takes the request body and updates it. Okay, so create and then updates a particular to do. But again, we can just do this all in one line with a nice neat little async await. Yay for async await, for making life easy. Okay, so now it would just be to do dot find. This is all the different Mongoose functions. These are all built into Mongoose. Find by ID and update. And the things that find by ID and update, first you have to pass it the ID, which would be rec.params.id, because we're passing in the ID. So update that one, and how are you going to update it? Using the request body. Okay, and that'll update it. And then that's it. That one's done. Okay. Cool. Let me just save this so that way this does like all of its auto formatting magic. Okay, so there we go. So see, it broke it down just to make it a little bit easier to read. And let's just do the final one, which is the delete route. And then we'll test those two out. Okay, and the delete route, or actually it's referred to as the destroy route, which is a delete request to /to-do/id. Oh, I forgot a mistake here. We didn't put the param in there. :id. Okay. So, again, a way to do find by ID and update. This time it's find by ID and remove. See, find by ID and remove. And all it cares about is the ID. I don't need to pass it the request body because you're not updating it, you're removing it. And then that's it. That's done. Okay, we've just done a full CRUD API. How cool is that? Now let's test those out. So now if I do, so the first I'm going to do a get request so I can get an ID. So let's do get request /to-dos. So let's update eat your vegetables. No one wants to eat their vegetables. Well, let's just pretend that I did eat my vegetables. So I completed it. So I'm going to do put for update. So / put the ID at the end. I'm going to copy the text here. Eat your vegetables. And now it's going to be true. I'm going to change it to true because my vegetables have been eaten. So then I hit send. Cannot put to-dos. Oh, did I forget to make? Oh, I did. This is not a put. Put. Oh, I changed the wrong one. Post. Post. This one should be put. And this one should be delete. There we go. So now all that should be jiving. Okay, so now if I do this, and see, that's when you see these errors, that always tells you that something is wrong with your route. The server's working, or else you wouldn't have gotten this error. So your server's running and doing its job just fine. It's just saying that, hey, there's no route that meets this definition. There's no put, so that told me that I did something wrong. I either defined this part of the URL wrong, or I defined the method wrong. I was pretty confident that I got this right, so I went and checked the method, and as you saw, those were defined as post, not as put. So I fixed that. So now if I hit send, and now it updates the thing. Okay, but notice it gave me back false. This has to do with a quirk in Mongo. So if I want to fix that, what I want to do is in find by ID and update, I want to pass in one more little property. It's an object that has a property that says new, and then you pass in true. And what that's going to do is just always send you the updated version. So just to check if that works, okay, what I am going to do is change this back to false. And if this works, this should be false. It should still give me back false. Good, gave me back false. And now if I change it back to true, it should be true when I hit this button. And it's true. Okay, good. So just had to add that little block there. And again, I will post like a link to the GitHub repo of all this code when I'm done in the video description. Okay, cool. So there we go. We got full CRUD. So now all that's left to do is deploy. Okay, and pretty much we got everything in place. Okay, I mean we're already using our production server. Like I'm already using the right URL. So basically now I would do is I would just go to Heroku. Well, first I got to push this to GitHub. That's actually mission number 1. So I'm going to head over to github.com, create a new repo. We'll call this Express Mongo to do API. Okay. Then I'm going to add this over. So again, I'm going to turn this into a repo. So git init. Then I'm going to paste that to add the remote. Okay, the remote's been added. And then I'm going to do a git add dot to add everything. Git commit -m. API done. That's my commit message. And then I'm going to do a git push origin main. Oh, wait a second. Gotta make sure that my git ignore should have done this earlier. In my git ignore, you should have your .env and your /node modules. Okay, that way you prevent adding those. If you already added them, you know, it is what it is. But generally, especially your .env should be not in your git ignore, because you don't want this, especially this. You don't want like exposing your Mongo URL to the whole world on GitHub. You just don't want that. Okay. I mean, I'm fine because I have a global git ignore. I set up like a git ignore file that just globally works on my computer for things that I know I'm always going to git ignore. Google how to do that if you want to do that for your setup. But yeah, make sure you do that up front. Okay. So now I'll do a git push origin main. Good. Now that's pushed up. And even if you have a global git ignore file set up on your computer, you still want to add a git ignore file, because especially if you're collaborating on teams, you can't assume that they have a git ignore file or a global git ignore, and then they're going to have the same things in theirs as in yours. So you don't want them accidentally pushing up the wrong stuff either. So you always want to make sure that every project has a git ignore file that ignores the things you need to ignore. So that way everyone's ignoring the same things. Okay, cool. So that's been pushed up. Okay, and if I refresh the page here, like now all my code's on GitHub, and notice the .env file and the node modules folder are not here because they're in the git ignore. So that's all fine and good. Okay, so now let's head over to, once you have the GitHub repository set up, now we're pretty much all good to go. Head over to Heroku.com. Log in or sign up if you don't have an account. Okay. Actually, yeah, no, I want to do that later. Let's do this later. Okay, so I got a lot of apps. Okay, so go to create a new app. And again, I will just call this Express Mongo, and I'll use today's date, 08/12/21, and I'll use my initials, AM, to give it a unique name. And then what I'm going to do here, I'm under the deploy tab. I want to switch over to there's 3 ways to deploy on Heroku. So there's the Heroku CLI method, there's the GitHub method, and you can also use the container registry. I'm just going to focus on this GitHub method for now. I do have other videos where I've gone over the Heroku CLI method, but I'm not going to assume that you have the Heroku CLI installed. And plus, I think the GitHub method is kind of like the most advantageous because it automatically updates anytime you push to GitHub, which I like quite a bit. So GitHub. So I'm going to go here and look up. Oops, I have a phone alarm going. Okay, Express. Racing the clock. So let's find that particular one. It should be like Express, Mongo. Express, Mongo to do API. That sounds like the one. Okay. Cool. Now that that's connected, what I want to do is turn on. Well, no, I don't want to turn that on. So you want that off, or else your thing will always fail to build. You want to enable automatic deploys, because you want it to automatically update anytime you push to GitHub. But this was set up too late. Your last push to GitHub already happened. Okay, so if you want it to deploy right away, you're gonna have to do a manual deploy here. So then click on deploy branch. Okay. So that's going to take a second and do things. It's basically what it's doing. It's essentially what it's doing. It's cloning your project, and then it's installing all the node libraries, setting up the whole environment, setting up the whole project. So see, now I'm successfully deployed. So if I open up the app here, I should get hello world. See, that worked. Okay. But watch what happens when I go to /todos. Notice it's taking a while. The reason is it's not connecting to the database because it doesn't know where the database is. Because again, I was delivering the variable through the .env file, and the .env file doesn't get pushed up to GitHub. So it has no idea what the database URL is. So anything that I defined in the .env file, for the exception of the port, because Heroku provides that variable. So Heroku is going to assign my app and random port on their servers So one day it could be on like 10,000, another day it's on like 386, and it's Heroku decides that. That's why we have to use that variable port. But for every other variable that was in my .env file, I got to make sure that in the settings section, I have to go down here to config vars and define the variable. So database URL, and let me just go copy it from my .env file here, because it's got to be the exact same value, so it works the exact same way. So think of this section config vars as your .env file when you're running your app from Heroku. Okay, and .env, the .env file is used when it's on your computer. Okay, or if you decide to set up your own server from scratch, which chances are, if you're watching this video, probably not your aim at the moment. Okay, but that's all connected now. So now if I open up the app, and now if I go to the /todos, and there's my data. Okay, the whole API is now up and running and working again. And I could go now copy this URL, take it over to Insomnia. Let's test out the routes one more time. So we have get to-dos. I can get one of those. Let's grab one of these IDs. So we do to-dos / that's our show route. So we can get one of them. That works. Okay, now let's do our create route where I can create a to-do. So let's do post. Okay, eat your cheese. Send. Created a new one. Eat your cheese. Now let me try updating it. Put. So it has to be / and then I have to grab the ID. So here's the ID. Okay. And let's change that to false. Send. Good, it's working. And then last, let's do delete for that particular one. Eat your cheese has been deleted. And let's go back to get. Double check the full list. Make sure that eat your cheese has been removed. Eat your cheese is not there. So we've just tested all the routes. Our full API is working A-OK. How nice is that? Okay. So we started from zero with 0 files. Okay, and we did this in, let's see here, how long is this video? We did it in 52 minutes, in under an hour. So we went from 0 to deploy in less than an hour. Okay, with Express, with Mongo. Okay, cool. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I'll put the link to the repo so that way you can look at the code in the video description. So you guys have a great day and enjoy. My name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Make sure to join the community over there at devnursery.com by joining the Slack and Discord communities there. And I'll see you all later on. Make sure to follow me on Twitter, LinkedIn, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. See you all later.